Hello and welcome back to the Poetry for Procrastinators podcast. As always, I'm Allie.
And I'm Jenna.
On today's crash course, we'll be discussing famous poet Don Patterson. We're going to start off with some background information before we dive into these groovy poems.
Okay, so Don Patterson was originally from Dundee, Scotland. At the age of 16, he moved to London as an aspiring jazz musician. He later became interested in poetry by meeting up with the famous poet Tony Harrison. Don Patterson is majorly influenced by Coleridge, Paul Muldoon, Derek Mahon, and Michael Longley. He has won many awards such as the Forward Prize for Best First Collection, the T.S. Eliot Prize, the Geoffrey Faber Memorial Prize, and the Whitbread Poetry Award, along with many others.
Also, the Poetry Society named Patterson one of the new generation poets. What an honor. From the Independent UK's interview with Don Patterson, they asked him the question, "What's the point?" And his answer, interestingly, was to accept there isn't one and be cool with it. So, for all you procrastinators, if you can't find the point to this poem, don't worry, there might not be one. Everything's open to interpretation.
So one of the poems that I chose to analyze was The Dead. So this poem discusses the idea of death with new life. So basically when we're buried in the ground, eventually we become part of the soil over time with our bodies decomposing. So Patterson suggests that when the flowers and grass bloom up from the ground, like at the graveyards, our remains become one with nature. He says we become with nature because our body is literally growing back up into the earth as flowers, grass, anything that's growing in the ground, and we're once again just exposed to the outside. When he discusses if we are the masters of flowers or vice versa, it's because once we are gone, the flowers are all that's left. And ultimately, it is the flowers that are bringing us back up into the world, because when the flowers grow up and sprout up again, it's like new life being reborn. So the next poem that I chose to analyze was The Error. So in this poem, the bird is to air, and the whale is to sea, and the man is to dream, all represent the human mind. So the whale deep in the ocean represents us reflecting on our inner selves, and the bird in the air represents us reacting to the outside world, and the dream is the mind in total. According to the Crescendo Blossom Poetry Review, this poem reveals the function of the human mind. Us humans often have trouble finding a balance, focusing with the two aspects of the outside world and the world that's going on inside our head. So when we get too busy with one, we often forget to realize what's going on in the other realm. And this is what the last stanza is referring to when they say, "We find however deep we listen, so however deep we're reflecting on ourselves, that the skies are silent." So we focus so much on our inner selves, we often forget what's going on in the world around us. Another one of Don Patterson's poems that I chose to analyze was called The Flowers. So this poem is all about appreciating nature, which is a very common theme among many poets. So what Don is trying to say here is that flowers are pure and only survive in the earth, yet we still take it upon ourselves to pluck them and give them out as presents for recitals, anniversaries, graduations, etc. But we still know they die, but we choose to do it anyway. And they talk about flowers growing up, everything growing up, and then they talk about us in the second stanza trudging along, describes humans as heavy selves among the worlds. And basically what it's saying is nature is still growing up, everything's growing up, but us humans, we stomp down. Nothing we do is up. Every step we take is stomping down to the ground, but the flowers are still growing up. So it's just about appreciating nature more and just trying to help readers gain a perspective on the world around us.
The next poem we decided to analyze is called The Lie. As was my custom, I'd risen a full hour before the house had woken to make sure that everything was in order with the lie, his drip changed and his shackles all secure. I was by then so practiced in this chore, I'd counted maybe 13 years or more since last I'd felt the urge to meet his eye. Such, I'd like to think, was our rapport. I was at a full stretch to test some ligature when I must have caught a ragged thread and tore his gag away. Though as he made no cry, I kept on with my checking as before. "Why do you call me the lie?" he said. I swore it was a child's voice. I looked up from the floor. The dark had turned his eyes to milk and sky, and his arms and legs were all one scarlet sore. He was a boy of maybe 3 or 4. His straps and chains were all the things he wore. Knowing I could make him no reply, I took the gag before he could say more, and put it back as tight as it would tie, and locked the door, and locked the door, and locked the door. This poem is an interesting reflection of Don Patterson's daily life, which he refers to as all a lie. This lie, however, is shown as a real human, in this case a little boy, locked up in chains and straps, showing that Don had either a secret in his life that he was keeping hidden, or trying to hold back his true feelings. Many have speculated that this secret is that Don is gay and knew it since he was that little boy, but kept it locked up so that no one would know. However, there's no concrete evidence that this is true, which leads us to our next analysis. He was talking about his marriage and the daily struggles he had to go through before divorcing his only wife. I interpreted the lie as being his own divorce. The boy, which he tends to so faithfully and yet has remained detached for, quote, 13 years or more, is any one of the number of small lies in his relationship, lies that somehow culminated to that one big lie, that everything is just fine. So before the lie could speak, he puts the gag back in his mouth and locks him back up. The next poem we decided to analyze is called The Roundabout. This touching poem is dedicated to his 2 sons, Jamie and Russ. It is about a Father's Day out with his sons just after his separation from their mother. This is shown in lines 4 and 5 when he says, quote, "The first day of good weather, our first out after me and your mother," end quote. Quite honestly, this piece is an underrated masterpiece. Him and his sons are at a park that they used to go to as kids. According to Sarah Crown's review on The Guardian, Don manages to convey both the father's guilt and his son's resilience throughout the whole divorce. It's their energy that keeps the world turning and the grief and pride that this creates. I can deeply relate to this poem because my parents are divorced as well, and that the first time that you see your dad after he just moved out is really something you never forget. It's when you finally realize that he isn't coming back home with you, and to cherish your moments together because they become fewer very quickly. This is the memory Jamie and Russ will forever have. The final poem we decided to analyze is called Mercies. This poem is a real tearjerker. Again, a touchy subject for me given I put 2 of my own dogs to sleep.
Me as well.
This raw and emotional poem shows Don and his dog's last moments together. Through Don's words, the reader knows that the dog realizes what's about to happen to her. Lines 5 through 8 say, quote, "On the steel bench, knowing what was taking shape, she tried and tried to stand, as if to sign that she was still of use. She could escape our selection," end quote. She tries to escape the inevitable, but Don lays her face against his and tells her that it's okay, that she goes. The dog then lets the needle enter and her worries disappear. Jenna and I have noticed that there is no strict theme that Patterson only writes about. He writes of the current and recent events in his life, so Mercies falls right along with this pattern. Yet it's one of my favorite of all. We hope you enjoyed this crash course on Don Patterson. Just remember, if you've procrastinated, don't worry, you have the Poetry for Procrastinators podcast with us. Till next time.
All Poetry for Procrastinators podcasts are sponsored by Burns & Noble.